They were a very kind and generous family. Hard work had made them wealthy and respected in society. No one would imagine that the woman would one day disappear without a trace. Everything pointed to an abduction, but no one ever called them to ask for any reward. But what actually happened is even worse than anything you can imagine. When Peter became engaged to Maria, he had a job as an assistant in a company that manufactured beer. He was in his second year of chemical engineering, and Maria was learning how to prepare the best desserts in the world because she was studying pastry. The dedication and commitment that Pedro put into his work was truly unique. Before long, he was already the plant manager. He was promoted the day he found out he was going to be a father for the first time. His heart was very happy, and he was also very grateful for the blessing he had to take care for and protect the little boy. Pedro longed for his son to be able to have his mother's beautiful Chinese eyes, as this was always very appealing to him. Pedro was extremely worried about the enormous responsibility that was coming. He even wanted to be able to give her everything they could not give him. With his career completed, he worked very hard to not only be the plant manager, but also the one who prepares the chemical values of said bottle, and thus be able to exercise all that he had learned. Pedro was literally almost not at home. The poor man worked a lot. The overtime had him exhausted, and when he got home, all he wanted to do was sleep. He played with Maria's belly in his free time, but almost never touched her as a partner. Maria was a little tired of the situation they were going through, but Pedro promised her that it would only be for a short time until he got that promotion. Unfortunately, that promotion never came. The baby was born and was about to turn 3 years old. What Pedro did was to start his own beer company and compete with his former bosses because Pedro felt that he could create a much more attractive and fine formula for the palate. That is how Pedro accomplished that and became a very wealthy man. They moved to a new neighborhood, a luxurious one, and he even bought a nice car, and for his wife, one of the nicest in the city. The truth is that Maria was very happy for his achievements, but she and her son missed seeing their father sharing with them from time to time. The promise of having more time for it became distant with the excuses Pedro always had. One day, Maria threatened Pedro to leave with her son if he did not take them on vacation. Pedro, feeling intimidated at that moment, heeded her request, and they went to a beautiful land, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. The trip was a unique moment spent as a family. Pedro was talking about the possibility of having another child, since he already had a way to feed him and give them a good life with all the successes he had achieved. So they both said that they would have a new baby that year, but something strange happened. One day, Pedro got sick and had to stay in the luxurious hotel room he had hired. Maria left her son Santiago sleeping in his bed, and Maria, in order not to miss the wonderful land of Rio, went out sightseeing. And on the way, she made good friends and had a good time with the natives. The tour ended and everything returned to normal, but Pedro changed his way of being, and already having a lot of money, he moved away from business and left people in charge of his administration. But Maria was no longer the same. She spent more time locked up in her room than in the big house enjoying its facilities. One day, Pedro came home from a walk with the child and left a letter from his wife that said, "Don't forget that I love you." Pedro prepared a romantic dinner with candles and a nice decoration, but something incredible happened. Maria never arrived. Pedro searched desperately everywhere for her. He spent a lot of money in a search or rescue, but everything was in vain. It seemed as if she had been swallowed by the earth. Pedro did not know what to do. He was desperate. They never called to ask for anything at all, and if they had, Pedro would have no problem to deliver everything they asked for. Pedro blamed himself for everything that had happened and the desperation of his beloved wife. But he was so depressed that he did not even take a bath anymore, much less change. He spent money and even asked for tips in the street with his son. His neighbors repudiated him and even wanted to remove him from the apartment building where they lived, but they couldn't. One day, Pedro was walking through the center of the city, and out of nowhere, he began to complain of hunger. But his father was begging for food and ignored him. Very sad and looking at the sky, Santiago found a cell phone when he was kicking the thick sand of the place. He could not believe what he had found. Immediately, he unlocked it, and when he opened it, he could not believe what he was looking at. There were pictures of his mother who disappeared one day up to more than 6 years, and of course at that moment, he recognized her by the many pictures that his father broke daily to get the guilt out of his head. At that moment, he showed the cell phone to his father and he could not believe it. It was her. But Maria at that moment, and without thinking twice, he called the police and told them the story and ordered them to look for that woman immediately. The police traced the phone and told Pedro that it belonged to a mother who was on vacation in that place and that they would give it to her. Pedro followed him, and when he saw Maria, he started to run to hug her, but when she noticed that Pedro was looking at her, he also noticed that there was a child near him. At that moment, she started to cry on the floor and asked for forgiveness repeatedly. Forgiveness because as she touched her son and cried with emotion, then Maria stood up and told him the truth of the story. When they were in Rio de Janeiro, she went out with some friends, and while he took care of the child because he was very sick and on that day she slept with a native of the area, it is then that days later she noticed and discovered that she was pregnant. Of course, she did not want to betray Pedro giving him a child that was not hers, and lest that people speak ill of her, then she made the decision to go to Brazil again and give birth there. After giving birth to the child and returning to her country, but when the little boy was born, she had so much love for him that it was impossible to tear him out of her life. So she stayed 6 years and had planned to return to see her son. Pedro cried when he saw her and told her everything he had been through, to the point that he felt so much guilt that he became depressed and walked down the street like a madman. "Well, I loved you," he told her. Maria told him that if she accepted her with his mistakes, everything could be like before because she still loved him and wanted to get her family back. For Pedro, this was difficult, but for his son, he tried. He forgave his wife and accepted her with his other son, because the father was a misfit who went from party to party and had abandoned them several years ago. But he felt sorry for that child and for Maria, who was his lifelong friend and wife. Pedro gradually fell in love with her again after seeing how she was a mother and her sweet behavior with her children, despite the mischief they did. Today, they are still in a process of reconciliation and go out on dates. Pedro's heart is very good and generous, and by cheating on the other little guy, he is able to have his last name. Friends, we have reached the end of this story. Hey, tell me, what did you think? If you like, give like and share this video with all your friends and family in all your social networks. Turn on the notification bell so you can receive more content like this every week. See you next time.